I'm so excited to dive into this topic because I feel like it is one that I think I said this in the email even, but it's like sometimes it's so obvious once you hear it or once someone says it to you. But I think it's one of those things that's so hard when you're in it to spot. I know this personally, and because obviously I help clients with this all day. So I'm excited to share all this with you. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Morgana. Thank you for being here. Hey, Lauren. Welcome. I'm happy for you to be here too. Um, so anyway, like this is probably something where you're gonna be like, oh shit, it's that. But sometimes we need an oh shit, it's that moment. So the thing that's good about it, I think I said this in the email too. So just reading you the email. No, I'm kidding. But the thing that's good about it is like it's not industry related. It like has nothing to do with our clients. It's not about like how good we are, anything like that. It's like literally this one thing that festers in our brains, I think, and is something really to excavate because I feel like it's also something I said it's not the industry and it's not right, but it also is something that I don't think our industry talks about enough because we never talk about like the trade-offs or like the challenges that come with growth. And so this has to do with that. And so I think sometimes it's hard to spot because it's just not talked about and it's not as obvious. So hey Laura. So we're gonna get into that. First thing though is giveaway today. So giveaway today is $100 gift card. So as you guys know, I always just want to say thank you for being here, for spending time with me, for listening to the content. It means so much to me. So as a thank you, $100 gift card for anyone that comments, joins us, says hi. I said joins us, but specifically I do mean comments because that's the only way we'll know. So that is a requirement, but it could be anything. Hi works. So anyway, let's dive in. So the thing is, it's funny because I'm like, oh, I want to like be conscientious of how I say this because, excuse me, I think that it's one of those things that it can come across the wrong way at first. So take it for what it's worth when I say it, but we're going to give context around it. And so I think the thing is wanting what you want more than you don't want it. And so the reason I say like, oh, I hate how that sounds is because I feel like there's always like some shit in like the business coaching world around like, do you want it bad enough? And like, are you willing to invest because you want it bad enough and all that kind of stuff? And I don't like buy into it in that way. But I do think there is an element where sometimes we are more scared of what comes with what we want than we actually want the thing. And those scales really keep tipping toward, I'm actually more scared of it than I want it. And so I have like a million examples that we're going to go through because I feel like this is really helpful to see it in practice. But I just wanted to context it with this is not one of those like, you don't want it bad enough kind of things, but it is like there is a lot that goes on in our brain when we're hitting a plateau around typically that there is fear of going past that. And the fear of going past that is much stronger, right? Than the fear of staying where you're at. So we're going to get into those examples. Hey, Alexandra, thank you for joining me. Yeah, so true. All for resetting this one. Okay, let's do it. Let's reset this one. So I wrote down like a million examples, but so let's just start with like a really obvious one. I think so many people think they want a big audience or want to go viral. But the second they have to think about any of the trade-offs that come with that, they are an immediate no, right? So like, what are the trade-offs that come with a big audience? A lot of people having shit to say about whatever you're doing, whether it's justified or not, whether they're correct or not, like that is part of it. A lot of responsibility that comes with it, I think, like in terms of like what you say, how you say it, how you influence things, how it affects people. Virality, I think, almost any piece of viral content that truly takes off, in large part, most of the time is taking off because there's debate, there's discussion on it, there's haters, right? I think I did a whole live stream on this, but I had a real go to like well over 1 million people about paying off our nanny's student loans. And like, it went viral because some people thought it was amazing, and some people like thought I was like the worst human on the planet, right? But it's like that's what pushed it, right? That's what uh, created virality. And so I think that it's like easy to be like, yes, I want a big audience. I want to be reaching, a million people with my content. I want this, I want that. But do you want that enough that it doesn't matter if you get haters, or that it's worth it, or that you don't care as much about the negative comments? For most people, it's really hard to get past that hump, right? Hey Lacey, Adrian said, the way I wish you ran a mastermind and did these weekly chats like this. Oh, I love that. Thank you, Adrian. That means so much to me. But anyway, like I think that that's really, excuse me, an important one to see, where so many people, you could ask so many people and they would be like, oh yeah, I want the huge reach. I do. And then it's like, if you go, okay, but do you want everything that comes with that? They're like, oh my God, no. And so they're backed into this corner in their business where it's like they're trying to figure out how to have the huge reach without the trade-offs that come with it. And guess what that leads to? Plateau. I mean, it's that simple, right? And so then we get to a choice point of like, okay, what do I actually want from this? Like, do I need to get more comfortable with the idea of virality, or do I need to get more comfortable with the idea that that is just not what I want? And there's not a right answer here, right? It's not like you always have to get over it and you always have to like welcome every new level. Of course not. But there is a tipping point where you either have to decide that you want what that next level entails, or you don't, and that's okay too, right? I've had both in my business. I've had that time where I had to like come to something and be like, I want what that next level entails enough that it's worth it for me to work through my bullshit. And then I've had other things where it's like not even my own bullshit. Like I just don't want that. Right. Like I'm like, I just don't want to run groups in that way or scale in that way. So like if that means, the business is at this stage for a while, I'm fine with that. And so I think that's a really important example, because I feel like so many people get stuck on that one. Another one is that I think this happens a lot, and there's a lot of iterations of this, but we think that we want clients, but we absolutely hate and resent the idea of something else being on our schedule or someone else meeting us. Right. And so we're vocalizing and verbalizing and telling ourselves, I want clients, I want clients, I want clients, I want more people, I want more people. But really, we're like, if one more person fucking needs something from me, or like, oh my God, I do not want more calls to show up on my calendar this week. Right. And so we're almost like trying to figure out like, how can I get more clients without having the responsibility and the calls and the stuff? And so obviously there are times where you can do that depending on your business model, but for a lot of people, like another mastermind participant does mean more. Another one-on-one client does mean more, right? And I think that there comes a point where there gets to be so much resistance to that. I think this is especially hard when you're at an entrepreneurial stage where you have had maybe a lot of freedom in the building of your business. And now that you're like really running it and delivering on it and serving clients, you're really feeling the scrunch on some of that freedom. And I think for a lot of people that gets really challenging, where they kind of have to decide like, where's the tipping point? Like at what point do I just want to not have any more people needing me or responsibility? And at what point is that worth it? Right. And again, I just feel like so many people back themselves into a corner and get stuck there. And that's when plateau happens. It's like, okay, you want that, but you don't want this, but like those inherently live together. So it's really hard, right? Nova said right to the heart today, totally applying this to widening more into polyamorous dating too. Yes. I think that's such a good point, Nova, right? Like where I was even thinking about that in a dating thing, where it's like, if you get married, there are trade-offs that come with it, right? And it doesn't mean you can't make a different decision, right? Like you could be poly, but there are trade-offs that come with that too. And I think like knowing that those things are inherently tied together, like, if you're, I'll use the married thing because obviously that's what I have a little more example of. I was gonna say if you're poly, I imagine there's much more to manage, but like I probably am gonna butcher that. So I'll say like if you're married, like your ship or what is that? Like your wagon is hitched to someone else, right? There are a lot of trade-offs that come with that. It can really make things more challenging in many ways. It can rub up against all your freedom stuff, et cetera, et cetera. But it's like, that is like part of that agreement. And so I think it's just helpful to see that like there are many things we want that also come with trade-offs, and being willing to acknowledge and navigate those in terms of the like wanting it bad enough is absolutely crucial to be able to keep growing. Yes, exactly what I felt last year. Yeah, Lauren, thank you for sharing that. Michelle said, I feel like I struggle when I think about trade-offs because I start to overthink them and can basically talk myself out of everything. But I've also done a lot of things in my life by just following the polls and not overthinking the trade-offs. I mean, I don't think you have to like think about them constantly, but I also think if you're finding yourself stuck or plateaued, it probably is a thing that needs attention. And I think like that might just be the work then of like, okay, I'm finding it really hard to pick between these things. Why is this so hard for me? What can I look at there? So I'm not saying you have to like obsessively focus on them, but I think when you are at like a stuck point or a plateau over and over again, it's usually has something to do with something like this. Like there is a reason we're like, cannot go beyond this point. Discomfort, fear exists out here. I cannot pay attention to that. You know what I mean? Or I do not want to engage in that. And so I feel like, you know, especially when we're building a business, you know, we have to be the like decider, right? And I think sometimes that's overwhelming to people to be like, I am in decision here. Like I am the decider of like what happens and what my schedule looks like and how this looks like. And so sometimes it can be hard to make these choices, right? Because it feels like you're making a really big monumental decision for your life. But like, ironically, like that's almost what we want as entrepreneurs, right? It's like put ourselves in that place of power to make these big monumental decisions for ourselves. So I don't think it's like a light thing either, you know? Yeah, no. I know you weren't saying that. Yeah. Adrian said, I'm finally at a place in my business where I make the most I ever have and haven't been on social in 3 months. I'm struggling finding the why to be on socials when my business is growing off the platform. The silliest issue when it really just looks like outsourcing. Why do we have the silliest blocks over the easiest things? Well, it probably means something else to you, right? Like I would imagine, like, I think you're probably logicking it in that sense of being like, yes, it's super simple. Like I could just outsource this and da, da, da. But like, there's obviously something that social might mean to you there. Excuse me. Like we were talking about, like, do you feel like, oh, I'm going back to this thing that opens me up for all of this stuff? Or like, you know, to me, social means like all this work for no reward, or like there's something else there that probably feels not worth it. You know, until it does, until you excavate that and you decide you want that to shift, or you decide you don't, you know. But I think back to that point we were just talking about, like that's where the power lies in these situations, is creating decision one way or another, where you're either like, I want to shift this 1000%, or you're over here and you're like, I just don't want to play that game. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, if my business doesn't grow as fast as it could because I'm not on socials, that's fine with me, you know? Oh yeah, there you go. I grew 100K on TikTok and the backlash was insane. So off socials is very peaceful. Yeah, that's what, like, perfect example, Adrian. Thank you for being so open and sharing with us. But like, that's exactly why, right? Like, you're like, I know that backlash comes with that. I know that there are going to be a lot of comments. I know people have a lot to say. And so there's probably a part of you that's just like, I don't want the result of that more than I want to have to deal with all that. And I think that like, that's fair. You know, you're allowed to decide that. Or you decide like, hey, I actually do want to shift that. And I do think it's worth it. And I need to work through that, but it completely makes sense, right? You grew really fast. You had a ton of shit coming at you. There you go. You know, I think revisiting in a new business could be where I spend my time and energy. Thank you for validating this. You're so welcome. It's crazy how I came to you in January wanting to hit 20K months, and now July is going to be almost 50K recurring. Heck yeah. Congratulations. So good. Yeah. And it's also just interesting to see how at each level, a new one of these kind of comes up sometimes, right? Like, it's like, maybe, I don't know, Adrian, I'm not trying to speak for you. I'm totally just making this up. But I think sometimes like at 10K months, you're like, I'll take all the hate. give me all the haters. I don't give a shit. Like, I want to like grow. I want to be further than that. But sometimes at 50K, you're like, fuck, I don't know that all those haters are worth are worth getting to 80K or whatever. Like, and so that's really helpful to see too. I see that with my clients a lot, where stuff that felt worth it to go from a certain jump to a certain jump was. And then beyond that, you're like, I don't know, like that one doesn't feel worth it. And so that's interesting to think about as you grow too. Like sometimes at the beginning, we want it so bad that like it just feels easier to kind of like take those hits, and we're a little bit more naive to what they are. Now that you're at 50K months recurring, like, you're at, I'm sure, like my husband and I always joke that there's like really, really good money, like a lot of us make in our space. And then there's like, fuck you money, right? And the gap between that is so vast. Like, fuck you money is like, you go to a restaurant and you don't like it, and so you buy the restaurant or something, like, right? Or like, whatever, you're flying everywhere in a private plane kind of thing. Versus like at 50K months, like you can probably do most, if not everything that you want to do aside from shit like that. And so, again, like the trade-off of like what you're probably anticipating to be like a ton of pushback, a lot, like sometimes it doesn't feel worth it at that point. And so I'm just saying that to like totally normalize and acknowledge that it does get different to think about these conversations as you go. Kind of like the concept of secondary gain. I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think it's definitely like that. Not like, hi, Amanda. Makes total sense. Yeah. I feel like that is, again, Adrian, just thank you for sharing that, because that's such a good example of like, what that entails, right? Another one that I see for a lot of people is they really want to serve more people, but they feel so intense about the pressure of serving more people. Like they're like, really want to grow. I really want to go to the next level. I want more people in my containers. I want to serve more people. Like in theory, that's what they want. Like their brain is like, I want to make an impact. I want to serve more. But when they really think about what that entails, that's really a stopping point for them. Like they're like, oh, but the responsibility of that, but more people that I'm supposed to be like helping get results, and more people that could be disappointed or not like me or whatever, like all that pressure that comes with it. I think that is a stopping point for a lot of people too in their growth journey. And where people, hit that plateau is that in theory, they want to serve more, but the pressure they put on themselves around that makes them feel like it's not worth it. So that's another one that I've seen like a lot of people have to excavate. And again, it's kind of back to that same point of like, is it worth it for you to work through that because you really want to serve more people? Or do you actually not want to serve more people and you just like feel like you should because the industry has told you that? But when we get to this kind of crux of like, I really want to grow more, but I don't want to feel any pressure from anyone else, like we are trapped. Of course, we're at a plateau. If you grow more, there inherently is more pressure sometimes, whether that's clients, team, eyes, visibility, right? And so you kind of have to get to a certain point where you know that you can hang for that and that that's worth it. I've talked about, how I've probably over the last, 9 months at this point, like really gone hard on Instagram reels, that kind of thing, getting way more visible than I was before. And I think one of the key factors in that was I just felt like I was at a place where I could handle that, where prior to that, when I was like, I had a newborn and had lost my dad and all of that, like I was not in a place where like having a bunch of reels go viral would have been something that like was good for me or my nervous system. And so at the time I would have said, and rightfully so, like, I don't care enough. And it was fucking true. I didn't. Like, I was like, I do not care enough to deal with all that shit. Like, I'm good. Right. And I needed to be, and that was right for this season. And then I kind of came out of that season and I was like, oh, I could handle this now. Like that feels like a less of a thing now because I'm more resourced, I'm more stable, all of that kind of stuff. And so just remember too, like these aren't hard and fast rules necessarily. It's more about like season, right? Like I might be in another season at some point in my life where I'm like, I'm going to pull back from this. Like I don't feel like playing this game right now. It's not worth it to do that right now. It feels like not a big deal to me, but again, I'm like kind of at a different place. Shannon said, I hear that a lot. I want more, but not so much that it impacts my life, lifestyle, schedule with the kids, personal care time, etc. Yeah. And like, honestly, I mean, this is not going to make me seem attractive as a coach at all. So like, what ifs? Um, but I just like, I think that that narrative in our industry that like you should be able to scale infinitely and that nothing should impact your life, your lifestyle, your schedule, your personal care time is just stupid. Like, it's just not true. I'm not saying you can't get to a point where things level out and you end up hiring more support and it balances out and whatever. But like to be able to fully grow your business and make these big leaps, it will impact those things. Like I was literally having this conversation with one of my clients recently, and she was her kids are both in like really competitive sports and all of this stuff, and that has been taking up like a pretty significant amount of her time, energy. Anyway, I was kind of saying to her, like, she has this really, really, really big goal. And I was just being really honest with her. And I was like, listen, I think you are probably going to have some trade-offs for that. Like, can you pull out your laptop when you're at one of these events? Or can you maybe not go to one of these events? Or do you need a little more childcare? Do you need this? And, obviously I know her really well and it was like a beautiful conversation, but I think like most coaches aren't willing to go there and say, hey, it actually might look like a sacrifice for the time being and be honest about that. I feel like we're all like, oh yeah, it shouldn't take that. But like, where else does that come from? If she wants to, massively scale this program, there are some things that logistically have to happen for that, right? And if her time is already accounted for, like, where else does that come from? And so she has to either be at a point where she's like, yeah, it's worth it for me to make these short-term trade-offs right now. Or she has to be like, it's not worth it. I don't fucking care. Like, I'm never going to pull out my laptop at an event. I'm never going to get more childcare. And so if this takes me twice as long, so be it. Right. But like, I really think this idea that like we should be able to have it all right now is what keeps people from realizing what a block this is and what makes people plateau for so long. For me and clients, it's been working my nervous system's capacity to hold more. Yeah, totally. Shoot, that disappeared. Oh yeah, capacity to hold more, especially when scarcity and fear of the other shoe dropping comes up. Yeah, for sure. Michelle said, thanks for the reminder. There are different seasons of life where we have more going on or where we're going to have more energy versus others. Yeah, for sure. Oh my God, the nervous system chat and emotional stability. Yes. I had 4 kids back to back, 4 under 4, damn girl. And I remember feeling so ashamed I couldn't do all the things. And you said on a live a few years ago that investing in my home was just as important as investing in my business. And I'm telling you, I'm reaping the benefits now. Yes. Like, I think that's so it, right? Like, fuck, when you have 4 kids back to back, when you have 4 under 4, I mean, like, you could probably barely make a reel, let alone be like, yeah, haters, bring it, like, I just think that, and again, the idea I think that our industry perpetuates sometimes is that like, you should be able to handle all of that. You should find a way to make it all work. Like if you were like, you know, the perfect entrepreneur or something like that, like you could mom full time and make this work and like, I just think that that causes so much pressure. And again, I think what happens then is that we miss these mindset blocks and we never get a chance to really make our own decision around it. And we stay in this fucking like, what is that called? Limbo. Um, Thinking like I should somehow be able to find a way to get out of this plateau without having anything shift or without having to deal with all these fears or without having to come to grips with some of these trade-offs, it's like mind numbing. Um, Another one that I see with people is like, we say we want more money, but the idea of the responsibility that comes with that is a non-starter for some people. It's like, they're like, oh yeah, I want to make $1 million, but like their brain is like, you don't handle money well, and you're not going to know what to do with the taxes, and you're not going to know what to invest, and you're just going to blow it all, and da da da. So it's like logically they can be like, every fiber of my being wants $1 million. Of course I do, right? But all this other stuff is like, no, you're not going to be able to handle that. You're not going to handle it well enough. You're going to mess it up. It's not enough, right? And so it's like, you want to stay safe more than you want the money sometimes. And so it's so, again, so easy to get into that trap. I think, you could input this for team too, right? I want the big team. Like, I would love to have more team. I would love to be the CEO running a much bigger business. But then really you're like, oh my God, I don't know how to lead in the way I need to. I don't want the responsibility of all that. Oh my God, how many people's paychecks would I be responsible for? Da, da, da. And you're trapped, right? Lacey said, I see this with my clients with chronic health challenges too. They think they need to show up like everyone else, and it's just impossible sometimes. Sometimes we have to choose health and make things work around that, even if it's slower. Totally. I think that even if it's slower, I think it's just so hard for most of us to accept, because I think so often the industry just preaches like it shouldn't be. And I just am consistently like flabbergasted by this, because I'm like, yes, I don't think we have to give up as much as we used to have to as moms, as people with chronic health challenges, all of that kind of stuff. But it doesn't mean nothing. Like, it doesn't mean there are no trade-offs. Like, yes, the fact that like Adrienne can have 4 kids under 4 and build her business is amazing. I mean, we're kind of like the first generation of moms that have gotten to do it this way, but it doesn't mean nothing, like it doesn't mean it, like you're not still dealing with the pieces of that. And I think the same with the chronic health stuff, right? Like, how lucky we are to be in a generation where like you can have chronic health challenges and still build your own business online. I mean, it's incredible, but it doesn't mean that it's still going to look like, pedal to the metal in the way that like someone else's might. So I just so agree with you on that, Lacey. I think that um, it gets so confusing for people. I think it like we really do so many people such a disservice by not being like, hey, the truth is with success comes a lot of shit. Right. I did a reel the other day on like building a 7-figure business. It was like a bunch of shit it came with, like having to hold boundaries over and over again, having to deal with your taxes, having disasters with team, upset clients, whatever. Like, I think we just need to be honest about that. Like, anyone that's running a 7-figure business has dealt with all of those things and more, or even like I had a client like launch a big program for the first time, and she got her first refund request. And I was like, yeah, like that's going to happen. And she was like, great, got the first one out of the way. This is something I'm willing to deal with. Good. Where I feel like we have to be willing to do that, where some people are like, yeah, I mean, I really want to like grow a course and sell it to a ton of people, but like never want anyone to be mad at me. I never want any refund requests. I know, like, it's just what happens, most people will assume like 10% of payment plans don't complete payment or different things like that. And I think that's just not always talked about, but it's the truth. And so when we're stopping ourselves from getting to that point, thinking that we will be able to be the one that, like builds a 7-figure business with no refund requests and not having to have a big team and not having to feel responsibility and not having to go viral and not dealing with haters and not like, it's just so, so, so unlikely, right? Especially if you want to have that business for any length of time, right? And I mean, it's so unlikely, it's almost zero, but let's even say it's 0.2%. Like, who wants to build a business playing to the odds of 0.2%? No one, right? So really, it's more like I have to get comfortable enough with those things that I can push past them, or I have to decide they're not worth me getting comfortable enough with. And then I have to let myself off the hook for thinking I'm supposed to be at 7 figures, Um, Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that so much. Adrienne said, I always thought 6 and 7-figure business owners were like next level. And now that I'm on track for 7, I'm like, we're all just hot messes willing to go there. I mean, nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. We're all just willing to go there. I was talking to a client of mine about that. She has a multiple 6-figure business, and she's in many ways done it being quite like perfect about it, if that makes sense, right? Like getting all the systems set up perfectly, doing the right thing, like all of that stuff. And I was really saying to her, like, this next iteration probably isn't going to be able to be like that. It's probably going to need to be messier. It's probably going to need to be like a shitstorm in a way you haven't dealt with. Are you willing to go there? And she was like, I honestly don't know. I'm like, okay, because pretty much people that are like double at where you are just willing to be a little bit more of a hot mess right now. And that's like her plateau right now, right? Is like, are you willing to be a little bit more of a hot mess? And she has to decide if that's worth it for her, but that's for sure her plateau. plateau place, right? And so, and again, like I was saying earlier to Adrian, like I think it's especially easy to plateau a place like that of like multiple six figures because sometimes you're not sure if the trade-off feels worth it, you know? Yeah, no, but that's such a good one. Am I willing to eat the shit sandwich? I was gonna blame my Invisalign, but I don't do it. I just have a list, I guess. Am I willing to eat the shit sandwich? Yeah, like from Big Magic from Elizabeth Gilbert. But like, I think that's so true. There's also like a really great Mark Manson article that he wrote a long time ago, kind of on the same concept. And it's basically like everything you love will come with other things, right? And until we all acknowledge that and then decide if we want that other thing or not, it's just really hard to get what we want. It's really hard to go there because everything feels like you're hitting a wall. You're like, yeah, but if I do that, then I'm going to get haters, or then I have more responsibility, or then I might have to give up a little more time, or then, or then, or then. And at a certain point, you have to be like, yeah, I would. And do I want it? And is it worth it? And is it something that I want enough to make that happen? You know, Mass Millionaire is totally in the vibe. Yes. Yeah. And I just, again, like, I think there's no right answer. There's like different seasons and different times to pick that. But what I think is so important here is like, and what I'm always trying to reinforce with clients around stuff like this is it always makes sense, right? If you're plateaued for a long time on something, it almost always makes sense. Like, Adrian, I know you haven't been plateaued for a long time. We literally talked about 20 months like 6 months ago, and you've like 2.5 times that. So I'm not saying you, but just to use your example as an example, like there would be a place that would be so easy for you to be like, huh, I wonder why, going beyond 50K months feels hard. And instead, if you're just like, oh, well, it feels hard because when I grew on TikTok, I absolutely blew up and I got all this backlash. So of course it feels challenging now. And I just have to decide what to do with it. Am I in a place where that's worth it? And am I not? Who cares? Like it always makes sense instead of it feeling like this elusive, magical thing, right? That we're like, I just cannot figure out why I'm plateaued. I just do not know why I am not getting more of what I want. Like something like this is almost always the answer. And as soon as it's not a secret, as soon as it's not magic, as soon as someone's not hiding the next level from you, it gets so easy to decide what you want. And again, either get over it or let yourself off the hook. Like this is not a call to fix every edge you find so you can make millions, right? This is an edge or this is a call to decide what those edges mean for you. And for some people, maybe they mean like, actually, I'm like super, super happy making whatever, multiple six figures and having great profit. And like, I don't give a shit about the rest. Cool. For some people, it means exactly the opposite. Also cool. But I think that we have to remember again, like it is not shocking or surprising. Like it almost always makes sense. Like if you've had a big thing happen, like a client get really, really, really mad at you and threaten you, of course you're going to feel some type of way about thinking about letting a ton of other clients come in. Or if you've like, I've had clients that have had burnout. Okay, well, what's their big fear with growth? It's always, am I going to get back to that? Am I going to take on too much? And so they push it away, push it away, push it away, right? Or if like, yeah, you've gone viral and been attacked, you're always going to be kind of finding that edge of like, yeah, but is it worth it to deal with all that? So like, just remember that like whatever your thing is, it's probably going to be the thing that creates that plateau sometimes. And we just have to be willing to, excavate it, go there, decide what our decisions are. Lauren said, oh, relate to the burnout example. Yeah, I've had so many different iterations of that with clients over the years, right? But it's like their brain, is so stuck on this idea of like, I do not want that. And so they keep trying to figure out like, well, how do I grow without adding a single extra thing to my plate? And that can be the plateau sometimes, because obviously sometimes we do need to add something. It's more about like how and how it feels and our capacity and all of that kind of stuff. And so I think that's like a really interesting one and I think it's a hard one too, because it feels so logical. Like it feels so logical to be like, yeah, but I'm trying to avoid getting in that position again. So I have to pay attention to this. But sometimes it's like, more than that. It's like more of like a fear. It's like a break we're hitting. Not for everyone, obviously, not always, but I definitely think that's a really, really relevant one that I've seen a lot, because a lot of people that had burnout then get into their own position thinking, well, I'll create my own business where I won't burn out. For me, I'll give you my example. I don't know if I've talked about this in forever, but I was working at a nonprofit and had a really high level director position, like dream job, for sure. And basically the chair of our board asked me to do something that was um, something I didn't agree with. And I left kind of out of nowhere. It was like an ethical disagreement. And when I started my own business, I really brought this thing of like, I will always be ethical. I will always do it the ethical way. I'm always going to be in integrity. Nobody's going to come for me on that. And obviously, integrity is one of my values, 100%. But there was this way, I think, where that like led a little too much for me. And I missed some opportunities to be like, of course it's ethical to like talk to somebody about a sale, or like, of course it's still ethical to whatever, insert thing, like say this in my copy or something like that. Right. But like it's like, you can use this thing of like, oh, I don't want to burn out, or I don't want to have to be forced to do anything that doesn't feel an integrity to me or whatever. And we can kind of take it so far sometimes where it's not like this logical thing where it's like we're hitting the brakes, right? Even to this day, like obviously I've always talked really openly about how courses aren't my thing, like, and I really don't believe that they are, but like there's always a piece of me that's like, it's so interesting because I do wonder if like there's any part of me that has like an ethics or integrity thing with that from that old stuff. Who knows? It doesn't matter. I'm super happy with my business right now. That's not like an edge I even give a shit to like work at the moment, to be honest. But I probably would excavate that if I was like, I really, really want to go a lot further than this. And it looks like scaling in a group way. And I really would need to think about that. I mean, totally. Yeah, it turned into perfection. Totally. I recently had the revelation that me giving discounts and pricing lower doesn't equal integrity. Yeah, isn't that true? The integrity to perfectionism pipeline. It's so true, Lauren. That is a whole fucking thing, right? Yeah, and you overcorrect and swing the pendulum too far the other way. Exactly. Like, and I think that's just what happens with some of this stuff where it's not like we don't want the result, but we're so scared of what that could mean, right? Of like being in a situation where you felt like you were acting out of integrity, or being in a situation where you felt like you were getting close to burnout again or whatever. Like, it's like, it makes sense. You're just not like, and that's what makes it hard, because your brain's like, oh no, that just makes sense. You just have a lot of integrity. Oh no, that makes sense. You're just being really smart about not burning out again, but usually there's more to it. It's just like easy to trick ourselves on that. Nova said, oof, totally hit a wall with the ethics stuff and went into hypervigilance and freeze, overthinking everything. Yeah, for sure. I get that. I really do. And it's, there's so many layers to that in the online space, and like everyone kind of wants to be like the ethics police, and like right, it gets crunchy quick. But yeah, we all just have to figure out like what our own lines are. Like I personally, an example for me is like, I feel like I have a very, what's the word I want to use? I think I have a very clear understanding of like how I could market my business differently than the way I'm currently marketing. If I wanted to get a lot more reach, a lot more followers, I think I would be talking about money a lot more. I would probably be talking about my client results a lot more. I would probably be showing my lifestyle more. Like I have so much clarity around what that could look like. And for me, that doesn't feel worth it right now. So again, like you can hit these edges where you just decide it's not your thing. At some point, it may feel more worth it to me to be like, fuck it, I am going to talk about money a shit ton more. Who cares? Right now, it doesn't. But like, it's just good to like see that for what it is, instead of thinking like, why can't I whatever. Why can't I grow by 5,000 followers next month? Well, I could, and I actually feel really confident that I would know what to do. I just don't want to. And again, like that is the crux of this mindset shit. It's like, I have to admit that I just don't want to, because if I did want to, I would have to think about talking more about money. I would have to think about what that ethics stuff meant to me. I would have to really like push myself and pull myself there in a way, not push and pull in a bad way, but I mean like in a way of being like, hey girl, you got to look at some of this. You really got to pull this out. At some point in my business, that might be totally worth it. Who knows? It doesn't have to be, and it doesn't have to not be. Like there's no like right approach to that, but I do think it's really helpful again to just see it for what it is and say it. Like I find so much peace in that personally when I'm like, I can know what to do and still not choose to do it. And like, I can be neutral about that, you know? Shannon said, I've definitely gone too far on ethics and discounting. Please take my kidney. I need a tattoo of the 80-20 rule. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just so, like, it's such an easy one to fall into. And I think our space is kind of rife with a lot of that commentary right now. And I think there does need to be more ethics and integrity in our space, like no doubt, absolutely. But I think a lot of people use ethics and integrity as like a marketing tool too. And that's where it gets confusing. Like the marketing is like, I am more ethical than anyone else. And then it makes this whole thing. Anyway, we don't have to get into all that. But it's just to say, usually there's a plateau there. Did I get right? Any more examples? Oh, another little thing that I wanted to say, because I think this is like nuanced here, is when I say you want it more than you don't want the other things, it doesn't mean like you don't want it. It's more like in theory, maybe you want to not care about the comments. You want to not be so worried about the ethics. You want to not feel so much responsibility. Like in theory, you want to feel that way, but the truth is you don't. And so that's the work, right? You're like, yeah, I mean, of course I want to not give a shit if I go viral and get a ton of hate. But if that's not true, it's still going to stop you. And so it's still the work. Do you know what I mean? So I think that like, for me, I could be like, yeah, of course I like don't want to let this thing from my past job have all this bearing on currently how I approach like ethics and marketing. Yeah, of course I don't want that, but it might. And so I have to be willing to like say that, see it for what it is, look at it, and either do or do not do something about it based on that. So I hope that's helpful. I think that this, again, it's just such an obvious one. It's like, oh yeah, if I'm not going after the thing, if I'm not getting the thing, there's probably a reason I don't want it. Duh. This is not like revolutionary coaching. You know what I mean? Like coaching 101. But it's just the thing we forget about so often. It's the thing our brain is so good at putting reasoning behind. And like, again, we'll use the ethics thing. Of course I want to be in integrity. Of course I want to have ethics. Like my brain can argue that point all fucking day, you know, and make a really, really good case for it. But usually there's something more there. So I hope this is helpful. I feel like this is, yeah, just the honesty that I hope that we can all benefit from greatly. Again, running a big business comes with a lot of shit. I think like that honesty is helpful, and doesn't mean it's not something worth wanting. It's just the acknowledgement of that. So I love you guys. I hope that you have a beautiful week. Exciting things. I don't think I've shared this yet. Yeah, I don't think I've shared this yet. On the 1st, so like July 1st, which is like a week, yeah, next week. Our new season 10 podcast coachee is coming on. So you guys will get to meet her and see who she is. And then the podcast launches for season 10 the following week. So just wanted to share that because I'm really excited about that. So I'd love to see you guys next week to meet our coachee. And yeah, then new podcast is coming out soon. So yay. All right. Love you all. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope you have a beautiful week. Bye guys.